Okay. So welcome to Teacher Education in EAP SIG talk. Today, a talk and discussion. You may remember, if you've been to the SIG before, that we have various aims. One's about developing a network and people interested in developing their own practice. And also we aim to contribute to the further development of the BALEAP TEAP, Teacher Education Teaching EAP Competency Scheme, the framework for the portfolio board. Paul, I never know quite what we call it. But anyway, this talk today should, we hope, address both of those. It's an opportunity for you to think about your own development and in relation to the BALEAP TEAP scheme. So I'm delighted that we've got Paul Hendrie, the BALEAP TEAP officer, here to talk today about the new streamlined, shiny new TEAP scheme. And Paul, I'm just going to hand over to you. Okay.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Carol. Yeah, good to see you all. It's lovely to see so many of you and see the interest in the scheme. So we've already seen in the comments here some interesting thoughts about stuff that you've learned recently relating to EAP and your own priorities for development as a practitioner. I think there were fewer responses on that, but we'll have a chance to think about both of these a little bit in more detail a little bit later, particularly within the context of the scheme. So let me see, is it arrows here or return? Just move on to the next slide. There we go. Right, so this workshop, we're looking at the features of the TEAP scheme. I recognise a number of the names that have appeared in the chat. I've spoken to some of you about the TEAP scheme in the past. Some of you before the major revisions that took place over the past year or so. So we're going to be looking at the features of the scheme. I'm going to be sharing the new handbook with you as well. There's going to be a chance to look at the handbook from your own perspective. And I'll be pointing out some of the main changes of the scheme, which hopefully make the journey towards accreditation more developmental, more clear and more aligned with the BALEAP values. We're going to spend some time working in small groups, unpacking the TEAP criteria, particularly looking at how they are contextualized within your own practice as well. We're going to be thinking about the way that the knowledge, the activities and the values interplay, how they interrelate with each other. We're going to be thinking about examples from your own practice, your own knowledge, and how that can help you to meet the criteria that are set out for accreditation. And then we're going to spend some time towards the end thinking about the next steps. What might you do next towards accreditation? So the first thing that we're going to do is just to look at what are the three different pathways of TEAP accreditation. So the reason we're going to look at this first is that we can see how many people are interested in which pathway. And this will enable us to make sure that when you are in breakout groups, you're talking to people who have an approximately similar interest in the pathway. So there are three different pathways to TEAP accreditation. The first is AF here, which is Associate Fellow. The next is Fellow, which is the F, and then there's Senior Fellow as well. So those are the same as in the old criteria. We haven't made any changes to those, and you probably recognise this wording from other schemes such as the HEA. The difference in these is not necessarily hierarchical. It's about the range of your impact. So for Associate Fellow, it's about your impact on your immediate students. For example, the way that you are teaching them, the theories that you bring into your classroom-based teaching, or perhaps your tutorials or what have you, if you are not a classroom-based teacher. For fellow level, it's a little bit broader. It includes your immediate impact on students, but also on your colleagues. So that might mean, for example, your development of materials which are used by colleagues within your institution, or perhaps you are someone who runs CPD sessions within your institution as well. For Senior Fellow, it includes those two levels, those two cohorts, I should say, but also your impact on your wider institution or even the wider sector. So it may be things like your involvement in SIGs. Maybe you are a member of a committee of a SIG. Maybe you are an external examiner. Maybe you are a leader of a team. So this has been envisaged with those in academic leadership in mind, but leadership is not necessarily the same as management. You don't necessarily have to be a manager of a team in order to have impact on your institution and the sector. So that's broadly the difference between the different pathways there. So associate fellow, and senior fellow. So range of impact. What I'd like you to do now, you're going to see a Menti appear in the chat, and I want you to rate on this Menti which of these three pathways is most appropriate for you. Which one is most likely going to be the one that you would pursue if you take this further? So associate fellow, or senior fellow. And I think the link's going to appear in the chat. There it is.
Okay, so we've got like 24 associate fellow, 13 fellow, 12 senior fellow. So sorry, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to make 11.
Well, while we're waiting, I'm just going to share a Padlet with you. So this features the TEEP handbook as well. So if you are waiting, well, we're getting ready for those two.
How long, Paul, for the breakout rooms? Sorry.
Oh, we're not going to start the breakout rooms just yet.
Okay.
But if we say 15 minutes. But yeah, what we'll do is we'll go through a couple of the features of the scheme, and then when we get to the breakout room activity, and we'll if we have 15 minutes of that. Okay, so I've just posted a link into the chat, a Padlet which we're going to be using when we do have the breakout group activity. I'm just going to summarize some of the key points from the handbook, which if you access that Padlet, you'll find in the first column on the left hand side. So what I'd like you to do is to download that. You will be using it through the rest of this session. And if there are any questions, you'll see on that Padlet a place for you to record questions that come up in your group discussions. You can, of course, add any questions to the chat as well. We'll have a look at them there. But if something comes up in your group and you're like, yeah, it'd be really nice to know the answer to this, and drop it in that second column of the Padlet. Let's go through and highlight some of the features of the scheme, and also some of the key changes as well, because as I say, I know some of you are familiar with the scheme. So what is it? What is TEEP accreditation? It's a reflective, developmental and collaborative exploration of your own practice. It's a way for your practice, your competence to be recognized, as well as your knowledge. It's a mark of your competence, essentially, as an EAP practitioner. It's achieved through submission of a written claim of competence, which is accompanied by a portfolio of evidence. And we'll see a little bit more about this in some more detail in a moment. I've just shared the TEEP handbook with you. You can download that at the website below. You can navigate to that quite easily on the BALEAP website as well, so you don't need to memorize that, but you will find the details there. So why would you do it? We do a lot as EAP practitioners. We're very, very busy people. And it's quite interesting when I talk to people about the range of things that we do. There's so much interesting practice happening. And I think particularly now, at this stage in our careers, where we're emerging from a real period of disruption. There's enormous range of variation appearing in the field. And the way that institutions and practitioners have tackled this is generating enormous amounts of variety. And it's interesting for us to take a moment to reflect on how and why we do what we do. What is it that informs our practice? It's very easy to identify the what we do. You know, we know what we do in a classroom, we know how we do it, but perhaps the why takes a little bit more thought. And it's good to take a moment to reflect, to evaluate our practices, to reflect on the successes that we've had, and to think back over our careers about what are those ways in which we have developed as practitioners, whether we are new to the field, whether this is our first year in EAP, or whether it's our 21st year. TEEP accreditation is a great way of demonstrating your commitment to the field. It is an involved process, but it's a very valuable one that people do highlight as unearthing things that and pointing out things that perhaps they haven't ever had to make explicit in writing before. The writing of a reflective account of your practice is a very valuable way to do that, to unpack what you did and why. And also what we see with TEEP accreditation is it's increasingly important for EAP employment. If you look at the BALEAP jobs pages, you can start to see TEEP accreditation appearing as a desirable characteristic as well. So it does identify someone as having a range of competencies and that knowledge as an EAP practitioner.